So our recording is going. All right, get my screens oriented here. So tonight we're talking about a little bit about systemic functional linguistics and functional language planning. That's kind of our big idea that we're working toward. And it's a huge topic, a huge area of research and study. So of course, we're not going into great depth tonight, but I do think it's a topic that's really worth starting the conversation about and bringing more to the front of everyone's minds, because I do truly feel that these topics would take a lot of pressure off of teachers that I see going on here. And so those of you in the group who have experience with functional language planning or systemic functional linguistics, feel free to chime in. Everybody feel free to ask questions in the chat, share your own examples in the chat. The more you participate, the better, because it gets everyone more engaged. And as in any time we get together, you'll learn just as much from each other as you will from me. So feel free to participate, and I will ask for your participation and encourage you to do that along the way. So just to make sure we're all in the right place, this kind of reminds me of those days of university where you're like, well, you're in the right class if you signed up for, right? You're in the right place tonight. If you're an English language development teacher, I'm going to say ELD. I know across the country we call our programs and our teachers many different things, but for the sake of understanding tonight, we'll stick to English language development, or ELD, programs and teachers. So if you're in that role and you are asked to support in content classrooms or support the content programs, then I believe this will be useful for you. English language development teachers, if you have small groups that you are still able to do pull-out settings and you have a little bit more freedom with that, then this would be useful for you. If you're a content area teacher, do we have content area teachers here? I know we're heavy on the ESL side. So if you're a content area teacher or a district leader, something like that, go ahead and let us know, and we'll make sure we get some good examples for you too. But if you are a content area teacher or a program leader, a district leader, school leader of some kind, then I do believe that while we'll be looking at it from a little different perspectives, that one thing we can agree on is that language development happens all day long. And the more our content teachers know about language development, the more we can all work together and we can do more collaboration. So always welcome our content teachers and our leaders into the conversation. So you have lots of choices, lots of ways how you can spend your time. And so I can tell you that tonight's session, it's short, maybe just a little over an hour or so is our goal, maybe about an hour, and then time for questions. But this will be a little different and unique. That's our little unicorn there. We want to be the unicorn. Because systemic functional linguistics can be complex. If you Google systemic functional linguistics, the first listing of articles you see and try to read are dense and difficult and technical. And so while all of that is important, our goal tonight is to try to pull the big ideas out and make it easier for everyone to understand the connections. So taking all that and making it comprehensible and relevant for your day-to-day school experience. And so in that, taking the research that we know, and then taking our experience and our ongoing communication with you, with teachers, district leaders, as we're doing workshops or working in our online asynchronous courses or meeting, consulting with folks, we gather a lot of information about what you're experiencing, and that helps us put together things in a way that can be much more relevant for you. And our biggest goal, my biggest goal, is to show you the flexibility and the practical side of how the idea of functional language, a functional language approach, can help your ELD program to flex a little and to adjust to everything that's going on in the schools around us. So how's that sound? Sound like it's worth an hour of your time? I like the head nods. That's good. Feel free to say something in the chat. Say, sounds good to me. I'll stay. You could say, I'm out of here, you know, whatever pops in your mind. All right, there we go. Margaret's gonna give me some encouragement here. All right, so my promise to you, now that you're all nodding and committing to be here with me, is that you'll log off the session feeling some validation for your role and what you experience and what the field is in schools now, and some relief about your ELD program and your lesson planning. Because I know as teachers, we worry a lot about those things. We worry about our kids, we worry about our lessons, we worry about our program, we just worry about everything. And so tonight I hope to give you a little bit of relief from that. I do have a bit of a cold tonight, so my voice is kind of in and out and coughing, but forgive that part, please. All right. So are you an action taker? Right. We're going to talk about some things to stretch your way of thinking, right? To stretch your mindset into what ELD programs are all about. So I want to know where you see yourself on this action taker scale, right? Are you someone who jumps right into action? You're like, yes, I like it, let's go. Or are you someone who's like, let me listen, let me think about it, let me go do some of my own research, I'll get back to you. What kind of action taker are you? Tell me in the chat box. All right, Margaret's a little bit of both. All right, Yolanda's ready to roll. Right. All right, Susan, that's a great point, right? Susan said, I don't get it until I try it, so I go for it, right? We would never tell you to do anything that was bad for you or bad for students. So just right, give it a try, give it a try. Time to process both. I like to plan. All right, all right. I think what we talk about tonight is going to bring out the best in both worlds. The planners that are in the room will have a plan, and the jump inners will have things that they can take right away. So thank you for participating. All right, so in the emails leading up to this, I tried to express to you how appreciative I am of the time you're taking. I know, especially coming right off of winter break and all these interruptions with weather and things, that your evenings are very valuable. And as much as I'm going to talk to you tonight about reclaiming some of your time while I'm taking your time. So I understand the conflict there. So I greatly appreciate you taking this hour. And I told you there would be a show up bonus. So what we have for our show up bonus tonight is that if you stay with us for the hour, then towards the end of the hour, I'm going to tell you how to get 1 month of free access to our Teacher's Archive. Now, the Teacher's Archive it's kind of like that digital file cabinet of everything English Learner Portal has done over the past, we're almost February 1st will be 7 years. So webinars, courses we've run, blog posts we've done, social media videos, like we have tons of information in there, mostly video driven. As a giant file cabinet that's available 24/7 for you to use as a reference. And if you can see it on the screen, depending on how clear your screen is, there's lots of categories. There's just talking about language development, interaction, literacy, language of math, writing, newcomers. So every topic we've ever talked about in English Learner Portal. And you can have access to that to dig through as much as you want in the month. And I'll tell you how to get into all that as we get further into the night. But that will give you lots of options for follow-up. So where this webinar came from, or the thought behind this webinar, comes from conversations that I've been having with teachers and with district leaders as we're working on different projects, throughout the past, I'd say the past 2 years or so. The same common themes are coming up, right? Our teachers are feeling confused with curriculum changes. So if any of these apply to you, in the chat box, you can say, that's me, put a hand, say yes, whatever you want, if you feel like you can relate to this. But it seems wherever I go, there's some kind of curriculum change happening. There seems to be lots of people who are adopting CKLA, right? That's something that I hear over and over and over. A lot of math curriculum changes, a lot of language arts curriculum changes, a lot of English language development curriculum changes. And so in that, we sometimes get a little lost in where we fit into all those changes. At the same time, we're worrying about our students and their growth because more and more students are coming onto our rosters. I haven't heard anyone lately say that they have less students this year than they did in the past, right? If it's happening, tell me where, because I hear the opposite all the time. We're getting more and more students. We're trying to hire more teachers, but we can't keep up. Everyone is stretched, and we're just worried about, are we able to help our students keep up, make up for lost time, close the gap, all those kinds of things. Thank you for everybody putting in the chat. I'm going to check those back and forth as we go. Feel free to comment away. Always the teacher issue: time, planning time, collaboration time, teaching time, right? How do you spend your time? We don't get enough time with each student. How do we find time to co-plan or collaborate with teachers across different content areas, different grade levels? I was talking to a teacher yesterday on a Zoom call, and she said, I work with 20 teachers. Like, how do we collaborate? And so these are the kinds of things we talk about all the time. And all these curriculum changes have left the ELD programs, I mean, all teachers, a little uncomfortable. But then the extra layer for our ELD teachers of trying to figure out where we fit into that, right? What's the expectation? When I started as an ELD teacher, most of the programs were pull-out. And then over the years, we started going into classrooms more, and I remember that pushback. And now that's much more prevalent, that we're going into content classrooms and collaborating or co-teaching or supporting in some way in the classroom. But I often hear that we're not really clear on what we're doing there or what we should be focused on. And hearing this from leaders as well of, I want to lead my teachers, but I don't know exactly what I want my teachers to be doing. I don't know what the best thing is. So we'll talk about that a little bit tonight too. So through systemic functional linguistics and the things that we're going to be talking about tonight and some ideas that we will share, I want you to feel more confident in what you have to offer and what you can offer in the classroom setting, right? We always said, I worked in a school years ago that was in a district that had very loose leadership, we'll say, right? And there was a lot of kind of, freedom. There's a line between freedom and free for all, but there was a lot of freedom. And that could be wonderful. But what I learned really quickly in that environment was that if I presented ideas confidently and with research and with expert advice and opinion, and I came in with a solid plan, then I was much more likely to get someone to agree to let me do what I wanted to do. And so that's really what we want to help you work toward, is kind of getting those thoughts together and really focusing on what is it that you want your program to be? What do you want to be doing to make the most of your role and your time with students and other teachers, right? You want to watch your students bloom and grow. And we really want to streamline that planning and collaboration so that it is time well spent when you collaborate with someone else, but there are ways to make it faster and more streamlined and more efficient so that we can get on to other things like the real teaching part of it. And our content teacher colleagues are trying to get on, along to the next things also. I was in, imagine this, it's an old elementary school. And you know how old elementary schools, they all have those cinder block walls. And if you go into the student bathrooms, there are those metal stalls and the line of sinks on the wall, a lot like this picture, but this picture is a lot more fresh and new than our old elementary school bathrooms. Right? I was giving a presentation to a group of teachers. I was just hired at the beginning of the school year, just hired in a new district as an ESL program specialist, right? I had 20 years of experience, but this was my first time in this district, in this, with these teachers. And my supervisor at the time said, all right, great, we're going to introduce you to the team. And we have this new thing we're starting this year. We're now part of this WIDA consortium thing, and it's brand new to us. And we know you did that when you worked in North Carolina. So you're going to present about WIDA and specifically about the language of math to the teachers. And I said, got it, right? I've presented to a lot of teachers. I've run a lot of staff meetings. I was an assistant principal. No problem, right? I can explain this. So went through my presentation, felt pretty good about it. I thought, okay, I sounded intelligent. You get that feeling in your stomach where you're like, okay, I looked through my slides 20 times. I know I'm saying good things, but I all of a sudden feel like I don't know anything, right? That imposter syndrome where you're like, why do they ask me to speak? But I made it through, got through all that. And as we wrapped up that part of our staff development day, I thought, I'm going to get a head start, run to the restroom while the coordinator wrapped up that portion of the meeting. So, not to give you TMI, right? But just hang with me there. As I was getting ready to leave the bathroom stall, I heard voices, and as I touched the handle, I heard, I don't care what she says, I'm not teaching math. And then so then I just put my hand down. I thought, what am I going to do now? Right? Here I am in the stall. I obviously wasn't meant to hear this, right? That wasn't meant for my ears. They have no idea that I'm on the other side of this door. And I'm new, and they don't really know me. And there was a couple other people there who weren't didn't have as strong of an opinion, but were supportive of this person, saying, yeah, I don't understand it. I don't get it. We're fine the way it is. And, we're just not going to do it. And, this too shall pass. And so I'm there thinking, all the things that are running through my mind. You think back to days like when you were in high school and you overheard something you weren't supposed to hear, or with your parents or whatever. And I'm like, what do I do? Like, do I walk out? I don't want a confrontation. I don't want to embarrass them. I don't want to have this conversation in the bathroom. But I knew that I missed something, right? That what I thought went well didn't go so well in their mind. So, in all honesty, I just stayed there for like 10 minutes and waited till the coast was clear because I didn't want to embarrass anyone. And I wasn't ready to talk about it yet. And I spent a good part of the rest of the day listening to what people were saying. And as I had to get up and present again later, trying to find ways to make it less scary, right? I didn't expect it to be so scary. And and so that kind of experience led me to then, I have to find a better way to do this. I have to find a better way to explain language of math, language of science. And that was the very beginning of the expectations of ELD teachers going into content classrooms and participating with the content curriculum. And so I spent, honestly, years trying to figure out, how do I explain what I know works in a way that is non-threatening and relatable, and that can be copied into other situations. And fast forward, I met, when I was traveling with the WIDA Consortium doing some training for them, and I met a wonderful person named Dr. Ruslana Westerlund. She is a researcher for the WIDA Consortium, if you've ever read any of the things that they publish. And Dr. Westerlund is a specialist in systemic functional linguistics, like knows way more than I ever would. And just through working with her and hearing her present and explain, I thought she knows how to boil it down. And we asked her to write a course for English Learner Portal. And through working with her to write that online course, learned a lot about how to boil it down. And so over the time, just try to understand, how do we take this really powerful research and make it day-to-day easy to apply. And so what we boiled everything down to is that the true belief that becoming a functional language planning expert is a transformation, the transformation that we need to reach new heights in flexibility. That's a big one. Efficiency and effectiveness, right? We're worried about time, we're worried about students, and we're worried about being able to fit into an ever-changing world. And I truly do think that you'll see how functional language planning can really support you in that. All right, so 3 key mistakes we started with in working on this idea. 3 key themes, 3 key mistakes that we keep hearing. Right? In the chat box, give me a yes, a that's me, a something, or I've seen it, I've heard it, whatever you want to. If you can relate to, I don't have control over the content, and I'm not a content expert. So I hear this when I talk to teachers, and it'll be like, the principal just told me that I'm pushing into, 7th grade science this year, and I don't know that curriculum. Or in my own experience, the principal gave me my schedule, and I am supposed to co-teach chemistry. And do you know how long it's been since I took chemistry? Right? I don't have time to learn chemistry, right? We hear these things, right? I'm glad um, slope and linear equations. That was really my first time. You're going to go teach an algebra. I said, do you understand that I had to take algebra twice when I was in school? That might not be the best idea. And so I had all those same panics as we go by. But what I'm hoping you will see as we go through this is that when we look at our roles as English language development people, if you look at your role from a functional language perspective, it takes some of this panic off you because you don't have to be an expert in chemistry or algebra. Now, the more you learn, the better, right? Of course, it's always great to know more about the content. But I heard things like the teacher in the bathroom who says, I'm not a math teacher and I'm not doing it. I can't learn all this. I can't do all this. All these things are true, right? It leaves you feeling confused and lost and you don't have control. It's stressful. But what I can tell you is that when you kind of reframe your mind and you look at those situations and you say, content is just context. All right, say that to yourself. Content is just context. Right, these are mantras, right? So as you walk into a new situation, content is just context. And what I mean by that is that language is everywhere. You could teach language in any situation you walk into. It's knowing the key pieces to look for to make it happen. So my context might be chemistry, might be algebra, might be kindergarten, language arts, right? You are given a million different scenarios depending on your grade levels each year, every month, right? You switch topics. You're like, okay, now we're on ancient Egypt. Now I got to do a crash course in that. Try to start thinking about it as context, right? You are not, even if you're in the algebra classroom, you are not the algebra teacher. Well, if you are, then if you're the content teacher, you're going to have to look at this a little differently. But for my ELD folks, you are not the algebra teacher. You are the language teacher. So our job together is to take a functional language approach to that and say, what language is involved in algebra? And that's my part. And then my algebra teacher is going to be the math person. And together we will make a powerful combination. But if we both go into the classroom thinking we're teaching algebra and nobody's teaching language, then we're not getting any further than just that algebra teacher was getting on her own. Right? So remember, we were put together in this situation, content teacher and ELD teacher, to make something, the 1 + 1 equals more than 2, right? We don't want to make 1 + 1 still equals 1. When you're going into a context, you are always looking at language, not content. Now, of course, you're going to have some basic understanding. When I was in the algebra classroom, sometimes I needed to stop and say to the teacher, like, after school, can you go through an example for me? Because I feel like I'm not being, I don't even know what you want them to say. So sometimes that happened, but once you know what questions to ask and you know what to focus on, then it takes a lot of that stress away and you can feel much more organized and confident that when I walk in this room, I know exactly what my role is and the teacher I'm working with knows what my role is and we can make this happen. All right, I love all the contributions in the chat box and I'm not keeping up completely. But we're all going to Tatiana for algebra help, I see from this call Tatiana. My favorite story from that algebra class. But she was an amazing math teacher, and she was wonderful. I had 5 newcomer 9th grade boys, talk about perfect storm, in that classroom of hers, interrupted education, the whole shebang. And she was wonderful. And she taught them the quadratic equation by singing it to Frere Jacques tune. And everybody remembered it, and everybody was singing it during the test. So, there are some great experiences that come from these things. Jared talks about the CKLA curriculum being so packed. This is what I hear from everyone who's using CKLA. And rigor, right? This is why districts are choosing certain curriculum packages, because they want rigorous curriculum, they want high expectations. We just have to use our functional language approach to find our ELD place in that world, because it is packed and you can't do everything, right? So just feel at least validated that we know you can't do everything. Pacing guide, racing guide. I like that. I like that connection there. All right, you all have tons of good ideas. Keep on sharing. All right, let me find my mouse. Okay, tell me, how do you feel about that idea of being able to separate language from content? Is this a comfort zone of yours? That would be like 10. I am perfectly comfortable with doing that. 1, I just haven't figured out how to wrap my head around that yet. Where are you in your comfort with separating the language from the content? All right. All right, so some of us have been thinking about this for a while. We're doing it. Now, how comfortable are you with coaching someone else to do this? So to help your content teacher know how to separate those. Or let's say you get a new teacher hired on your team and you need to coach that teacher into doing what you do. How comfortable are you there? All right, Tatiana, makes a difference, right? Are we working with experienced teachers, brand new teachers? Right, depends on the content. I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate that. And I think when these kinds of questions about how do you feel, it helps all of us know, like, okay, I'm not the only one who's a little shaky here or feeling good about here. So it's great to share. All right, this is another thing that I hear a lot. Trying to apply pull-out planning in a push-in co-teach world. Right, we've been planning how we plan. We all have our own planning style. We all have our own ways of doing things. And especially if you've been teaching a while and you started in a pull-out world and then it was changed into a push-in world, then it's difficult because you have to switch gears. It's a different approach. And so when we are trying to apply pull-out planning to a push-in world, I hear things like, well, with level 1 students, we always teach this first. Or with my newcomers, I have to teach that. The big way it came out when I was working for that school district where I was a specialist and I got caught in the bathroom stall. The next year, I became the ESL coordinator, so I guess it wasn't too damaging. We all got through it in the end. I got promoted. But I was the ESL coordinator, and we were writing curriculum, and they wanted a newcomer curriculum. I want a newcomer curriculum. I want a newcomer curriculum. Like, what do you think goes in a newcomer curriculum? And, newcomers have to do, you know, um, feelings and ordering lunch and parts of the body and all these things. And there were so many strong feelings about level 1 does this, level 2 does this, level 3 does this. We have this scope and sequence in our mind that's been really ingrained in us over time based on research and scope and sequence, right? Another thing I hear, things like, I was doing a workshop recently about writing with English learners, and there were some comments around the idea that they can't write a paragraph yet because they don't know their letters and their sounds, right? That they're in our minds, there's this sequence that has to happen, and how we do things. Or when I said that a newcomer can write a paragraph in English with the right supports, and had a reaction of like, well, that's not developmentally appropriate because a level 1 doesn't write paragraphs. And so we just have these notions in our mind about the order in which things happen. And so we feel like Shara said, like that feels like, right? I can feel it coming through the Zoom screen when we do these online workshops, that I'm just trying to keep control of what I'm being asked to do, right? That I'm not as confident working in the content teacher world as I am in my pullout world. And that's uncomfortable, right? You put me in the content classroom and level 1 students are supposed to do this, and there's just all this conflict in my brain about what's going on and what I'm supposed to be doing, right? We hear a lot of that going on. Very justified, right? So here's how that boils down. So if you've been feeling this way, I'm sorry, because it's hard. And I think we've all been there because we've all been through some of those changes. So if you can make each other feel better, just if you've been there, say, I've been there. I've been there. I've been there. It took me a lot longer to get through that phase than it should have. But what I realized over the time after that bathroom incident, and really stopping to think of how can I help them understand that I'm not asking them to teach math. I didn't know how to explain it. And so what came up over those times of studying that was the difference between a traditional approach to English language development, where we focused on research-based practices, but it was more along the lines of taking you back to your linguistic course days, right? That natural order hypothesis, right? That there's a predictable order, a scope and sequence, right? You said pacing guide, a racing guide, of how students are learning English. And we stuck with that for a really long time. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that is what we based our programs on, right? Everybody had the scope and sequence. In level 1, this is what we do with students. In level 2, this is what we do with students. And we did have some context, but we had more control over it as the ELD person. Like we could pick a theme. We could talk about apples for a month. We could talk about plants. We could talk about solar system. And we kind of worked in our own world. And we said things like, in ESOL 1, we teach this. And we had a lot of those conversations as curriculum writers. And my favorite question, and the curriculum writers hated it, I would just say, why? Right? In ESOL 1, we have to do this. Why? I wasn't saying no. Tell me why. And so we had the struggle of trying to switch gears into a world that focuses more on a systemic functional linguistics or functional language approach. Not saying one's right, one's wrong, just different approaches. And what we found is that the functional language approach, once you feel comfortable and confident in that approach, is a much more comfortable place given the expectations we have in our schools and in our classrooms and in our programs right now. Right? Expectations have changed a lot for a lot of different reasons. And so we're trying, it's like that square peg in a round hole. We're trying to make natural order type thinking fit in a world where so much has changed as far as how we approach education. And so in systemic functional linguistics, the language that you focus on is evolving in the way that we make meaning, right? How are students making sense of what's going on in the classroom that day? Making meaning as far as understanding what's being taught, being able to communicate themselves, right? We really start to look at language not as this step by step by step process. Like first we learn this, first we learn nouns, then we learn how to put a verb with a noun, then we learn how to put an adjective with the verb with the noun. We move away from step by step by step. It still exists in there, but we focus more on language as a system of options, right? More like a buffet or a big, you ever go to, like there's a Mexican restaurant near us that has this menu that just goes on and on and on. And you always pick the same thing because you just get overwhelmed by the menu. But language is a system of options, not a step-by-step process. And so if we try to shift our mind in that direction, and that when we're doing that, we're focused on the purpose of using language more than on the the language itself. So we're not so much focused on, are we talking about past and present? Are we talking about adjectives or adverbs? But we're talking about why we're even using language, right? Our communication needs. All right, so give me some feedback. Tell me this is making sense to me. This is really uncomfortable for me, or I don't get what you're trying to say. Give me some feedback here. What are you thinking?
Well, this reminds me, I used to work as a world language teacher, and we did talk about natural order. I don't know if that was Chomsky or somebody else, but we didn't teach, like, I remember learning that we didn't have to teach any type of thing in language order because when we speak, a 3-year-old can use the imperative verb, right? So, and I think in schools, imperative's not taught until like what, high school or something. But this makes sense.
Right, right. And it does play out if you think about your experience, if you took a second language through, junior high, middle school, high school, you learned a lot. I learned more of a natural order way of, this is how we're going to do things. We're always going to speak in present tense. And as Tatiana said, that's not really natural because even little itty bitty ones pick up different tenses, different situations. Um, so let me read through your comments really quickly.
So, so I think it's also looking at function before form. So there was a question there about a concrete example. So if I know that I want my students to be able to describe what they see in the clouds, right? I'm not going to tell them adjectives or words that we use to describe. I'm going to generate a list of words like, oh, it's fluffy, there's circles or there's circular shape, and then giving those language choices, and then students using those over time and through my unit and say, hey, there's different types of adjectives. We have adjectives that talk about shape, that talk about size, that talk about color, but they already have the understanding of what an adjective is.
Right. We didn't do a unit on adjectives, but we talked about the adjectives that we needed to communicate what we wanted to communicate about clouds. All right. So we'll go through some more examples, but you're right there with me, right? It's that function. What are we doing with the language? What is required of us? And then, making our curriculum kind of match what they need versus this artificial situation. Well, good, Lisa, confirmation of what you've been doing. Lisa, I am just so happy every time I see you in a webinar, in a class. I see Lisa all the time, and she always makes me feel good. You've had a good teacher along the way, Lisa. All right. I love when I see people come back. So we'll give some more examples as we go. And thank you, Tatiana and Amber, for speaking up. Anytime you have a way to clarify it, it's just like when you're working in class with your students and you can explain something 10 times, and then you turn around and the student next to the one asking the question says the exact same thing you said, and they're like, oh, okay. You're like, what did I just say 10 times? So feel free, jump in, right? Okay, you feeling like it's making sense? This is where you are. Ah, right. So Susan's nailed it, right? This is where we are. This is this transition point where we know kind of where we need to change, but what does it look like, right? How exactly does that happen? A lot of places are still doing pull out for the beginners. Some places aren't doing any at all. So we have a lot of different scenarios to talk about, but I feel like you're with me there. So just a little bit of background, if this is brand new to you, very little. I'm not going to go into great research background here. But systemic functional linguistics, just sum up the key points, right, based on the research of Michael Halliday. And like we said, language as a meaning-making system, right? It's how we communicate, and that is the most important purpose. Other researchers, Martin and Christie, look at it as a genre-based approach. And when I worked with Dr. Westerlund from WIDA, this is more her approach. She really started teaching me in a genre-based kind of idea that when we because we were focused on writing at that time when we were working together. So when we're talking about writing in science, like scientific writing is different from narrative writing, which is different from opinion writing. And so what language we need to teach, it's not just the contents of the writing that were different. And this is something that hadn't hit me until I worked with her. I know that writing to persuade is different than writing a narrative, right? I know there's different pieces. You have to have this, you have to have that. And she was really pushing me to say, it's not just about the contents of what a narrative has an opening and it has subsequence and it has this, but that the language is different. And you have to notice those language differences to be able to teach the students how to make meaning in those situations. And so we could come at it from that way to say, depending on the type of writing, depending on what we're doing, there's a different expectation to follow. Amber, absolutely agree with you. Look up Dr. Westerlund. Tell her I sent you. I don't remember the name of the Facebook page now, but I'll try to think of it as we go. She has a Facebook page where she posts all kinds of things. She's always writing articles and presenting things. She's wonderful. Doing workshops, conference presentations, soak up whatever you can get out of her. But so just a little bit different idea of, if I'm in the language arts classroom, then the language arts teacher is worried about what a paragraph structure is. I know I'm going to worry about it too, but she's going to worry about it more than I am. I'm going to worry about things like what? Reclaiming the language. Yep, that's it. Thank you. I'm going to worry about things like, okay, they need transitions. They need sequence words. They need ways to say how the time is passing in a narrative. Like, did it all happen in one day? Did it happen over a week, over a month? Those are the things I'm worried about, where the classroom teacher's worried about an introduction and events and, problem, a climax, a solution. Like, so again, 1 + 1 can be greater than 2 when we bring those together, right? I can use her context to teach all those language thingies. All right, that's the official term, thingies. And then another quote there, the goal of the language demands of the curriculum, right? Our goal is to make it very explicit that what the curriculum is asking for, not just like the math standards. Yes, they have to learn the math standards, but in order to show me that they understand that math standard, they have to be able to communicate it. right? They have to be able to have the linguistic resources, that language, to communicate it. And that part is my job. You can solve equations all day long, but if you can't tell me how you did it, then we run into a problem. And so that's where we're shifting. There she is, my famous friend. There's Ruslana. And I bring her name up a lot. There's a lot of researchers who have done a lot of work around systemic functional linguistics. But in my experience, in my past 10 years or so, Dr. Westerlin is the one who made it clear and comprehensible for me, right? She boiled down that research, and she continues to research and continues to refine how to explain it. And so highly recommend following her. But what she says is SFL offers a functional grammar that provides new ways for teachers to support learning about language that will help students continue to learn through language. New ways of talking with students about the language in the text and their own language choices. So the real key is being able, and most of you said you were feeling like you were heading that way, doing well with this is the content, the context of what we need to communicate. And my job is to help them communicate that, to bring it in receptive, and then to give it back expressive. Okay, here's our check-in. I'm comfortable with the idea that there are multiple valid approaches to teaching language, right? We're not saying that natural order hypothesis and related theories are out the window. We're not saying bad. We're not saying we've done it wrong, kind of like reading instruction, where we want to keep saying, oh, we weren't doing it right. We have a new way now. Well, how do we all learn how to read? I'm not buying that completely. All right, so we're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. We're saying that we need to shift a little bit to a new way of thinking. And I love that you all are okay with that, right? I felt like when I was in that bathroom stall, that the teachers perceived what I was saying as what you're doing now is wrong, or you can't do that anymore. And that is totally not what I intended. And so it was a great lesson for me to really work on learning how to explain these things. And I'm still working on it. Y'all can help me work on it. All right, so we had 3 misconceptions, right? 3 big ideas. And now we have 2 pieces of information that are moving us toward solution or resolution or our comfort zone, right? When you think of language, instead of thinking I'm teaching math, or I'm teaching science, or I'm teaching social studies, or I'm teaching language arts, or I'm teaching writing, teach to a purpose, right? When we teach to a purpose, the language comes out. So I don't know what happened to my summarize there. I have to fix my slide there. When you teach to a purpose, the first thing I want you to think about when you walk in to a classroom. Years ago, before I got to that district, it hit me before my time. Before I knew that research existed, I felt it. I was working in a school that we switched to all push in because 90% of the students were English learners of one level or another, somewhere on that spectrum. And when 90% of the students are English learners, then you can't really pull them out because who's left? And yeah, this is back in the days when Dr. Woodson was my boss. Good times. And so I'm sure she remembers that angst where they're like, nope, you're going in the classroom. And then we automatically didn't know what we were doing. Remember those days, Karen? Right? We automatically had our minds erased. We panicked. We had people who wanted to quit. It was chaos. All right. So what we joked about during that time, which now looking back many years later made perfect sense, is I called it doorknob planning. Because when you push in and you don't have co-planning time, you don't know what's going on, and we want to try to avoid that. So it was always a joke, but we talked about how we had to become experts where you just go and as you turn the doorknob and you open the door, you hear little bits about what's going on, and you have to be able to immediately identify what is happening in the classroom and then turn that into what language can I put with this? Now, I don't want you to do it as you turn the doorknob. But you can get to that comfort level where you can feel that comfortable that you could make that happen. That is not best practice, right? We need to plan. But the things you think of when you first look at the curriculum and other ideas is, are we going to narrate? Are we going to argue? Are we going to explain? Are we going to inform? Like, get a purpose first, right? I've got my purpose. It doesn't matter what we're writing about. I know if we're going to compare and contrast two things, that's what I picked up on, then I know the language I need to teach. I'm not teaching about text features. I'm not teaching about greater than or less than fractions. I'm teaching the language of compare and contrast. And I know what that sounds like, what it looks like, and I know where to go. Right. And the other thing that I heard was there's no room in the curriculum for me to teach writing. Now, there's a couple things on that. There may not be time when you're in the classroom, if you're pushing in, that you can work through a writing process and complete a piece of writing and really be fully invested in the teaching of the entire writing process. If you do some pull out, I hope so. If you're pushing in, it may not always work out, but what I want you to think about is that you do have a huge impact on the instruction of writing, because oral language is the precursor to writing. So even if you can't sit and write with the students, know that you are doing the right thing by teaching the language points, getting the students to practice those language points through oral language, through discourse, through conversation. If we compare and contrast together in conversation in the classroom, if I show them some ways to do that and we practice it, then when the writing comes, when the time comes to write, they will be able to more easily transfer those skills. So you are impacting writing, even if you aren't individually teaching the writing yourself, right? Or writing with them yourself. And writing can come in little bits, right? Writing is something we build up over time. So if we focus on those language functions and we focus on what we're trying to communicate, then all the bits and pieces that we practice, whether it's a sentence or a phrase or a couple sentences, those all build up and will transfer over to their writing as you continue to practice them. So I don't want you to feel defeated in that. Writing was my favorite thing to teach, and second being that early literacy part. And so somebody telling me I couldn't teach writing would be heartbreaking. All right, so here's another check-in. Do you agree that focusing on those language functions and focusing on oral language can be a very valuable role in the classroom as preparation for writing? Would you agree with me? All right. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your resources there. Thank you for giving little tips. All right. The last tip I have here for you is to simplify and routinize planning. I had to make sure that was really a word. It didn't sound right, routinize, but it is a word. To make a routine, a protocol. We talk about protocols all the time in professional development. Like, we want to repeat things that work. So a planning routine that you can take, because my first instinct, and I'm sure your first instinct, when you were told you were going into all these different classrooms and they're teaching all different things, all different times, different grade levels, and you go in and they might not be teaching what they said they were going to be teaching, like there's all kinds of different scenarios. But if I have a routine of planning that that isn't so reactive, right? That doesn't react to the context, but we plan the same way every lesson, every day, and just the context is kind of mix and match to match the situation we're going into. But the routine we have for planning, you could put me in high school trigonometry. I was asked to coach a trig teacher once. I thought, what on earth am I going to tell him? Like, I don't know if he's teaching it right. And then I realized that the trigonometry wasn't what I was looking at. I was looking at good teaching, right? So think about it that same way. Like, you know, good teaching when you see it, even if you went into a Farsi classroom and didn't speak Farsi, you know if it was a good teacher. So you know what needs to be taught regardless of what the context is. And so we have some ways to simplify and routinize that planning. So this is where the functional language planning framework came from. And this is just a quick visual to kind of go over the big pieces of that. Using the functional language planning framework, you can make a routine out of planning. So here's how you look at each situation you're given. And once you get comfortable with it, and you start working with your co-teachers to say, okay, here's exactly what we need to make this happen. And your co-teacher gets comfortable with it, then you are planning like super quick. You know exactly what the other person needs. You know exactly what the other person's doing, and you can plan much, much, much faster. So we look at the classroom, we look at the context. That's where your content teacher partner comes in. They're going to have to tell you those things. Like, okay, this week you're pushing into math and we're working on fractions and we're talking about, and so my first question is, what's the end goal? Like, students are going to have to do what with their fractions? Are they going to write about something? And they always are going to write about something. So on the assessment, they're going to say, I know that fraction A is greater than fraction B because, and they're going to be able to justify their answer. Or they're going to explain the steps, whatever it might be. Tell me what the goal is. Language function, they're going to explain. They're going to justify. They're going to compare two fractions. They're going, like, there's lots of stuff. So teacher, tell me what they're going to do. There's your language function. When you know that, right, we talked about genre. I need to know, are we writing a narrative? Are we writing a poem? What do you want from it? A poem about fractions. Then we want to, of course, we need to have our vocabulary. That matters when it comes to fractions. What vocabulary do we want them to be using? And we want to make sure it's the technical vocabulary, not the top and the bottom, but we want numerator and denominator. Right? We want to know the language structures, right? This is something we can work through to say when we are explaining a process or when we are comparing, these are the language structures that we use. And then we want to get into, okay, once we have all that under control, when are they going to use this language? What's their discourse opportunity? When are they going to talk about it, practice explaining to each other, practice comparing and contrasting? When are they going to have discourse? And the more we can make that planning routine flow and we get our choices down and we have our menu kind of set up, it goes really, really, really quickly. So that's a really quick introduction to it, but there are key pieces that if you are tuned in to the key pieces, then you could be presented. It's kind of like a superpower, right? You can be presented with any situation and you can go in and you say, I just need to know this, 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 and this, and I'm good. I know exactly what my job is if I know those things. And then, of course, you need to inform your co-teacher while we're teaching about fractions. These are the things I want to help them communicate what they're learning. And it's a beautiful partnership. So we have different ways of organizing it. There's different kinds of planners that we could share. There's different documents or templates you could use to, whatever is your style, right? We have different resources and tools for making that routine. All right, we're coming to the end of our time together soon. So what's been most valuable so far? I think I talked a little more than I planned because I got excited. So what's been most valuable so far?
I think the last slide that you showed us, where you had the different components that could help with planning. I have to do lesson planning, even though I'm a push-in teacher now. And the teacher shares her lesson plans with me, but then mine don't have to have all the components that a classroom teacher has to have. I just have to curate it to like ESL needs, and that's given me a lot of thought.
Right. And so we've been doing that and taking a long time to peruse it and think about it and study the less content area. And then we've really boiled it down to these are the key pieces, and you grab those and you can get a lot of mileage out of those. And when you have a routine, you have, I was in a workshop where I was the participant earlier today, and they were talking about developing programs and things, and it just hit me as so relevant to this that when you have a routine, it takes away the you know exactly what to expect, right? When you have a routine, it takes away the unknown. So then it takes away a lot of the anxiety, it takes away the fear, it takes away the unknown, it takes away the confusion. I know I am focused. This is my purpose, this is my mission. You are confident in it, and your confidence will come across to your content teacher as my person knows what they're doing and has a valuable role. And that confidence will then come across to your principal or to a district leader or other folks who you need to understand the approach as well. And so that routine builds confidence. And the more you use it, the faster it happens and the better you become with it. All right, so we talked about these being our big challenges, and I hope you now feel some ways that that functional approach can help you calm some of these, address some of these. And and that's my theory here, that systemic functional linguistics is right now with where we are in our education programs is just a better fit. It has a lot more flexibility, a lot more purpose versus theory, right? More student-centered, less scope and sequence, right? We can't throw away curriculum. I'm not telling you to do that. Don't go tell any bosses that I told you to throw away your curriculum. All right. All right. Focused, explicit, targeted, right? We go in, we got our eyes right there, and we know where we're going. Okay. So I hope that you have enough from what we've talked about so far to at least get started or to confirm what you're already doing, or to get started in trying to think about how to move this direction. So if you're comfortable with doing so in the chat, just either say confirm or get started. Like you feel good about what you've been trying to do and you can put more words to it now, or you feel like you're ready to kind of move in that direction. Right. Karen's completely right. Like this can lead into co-planning structures, very, you know exactly, same thing we say for students, you know exactly what you're doing what you're waiting for when you walk in the room. Your content teacher knows, you walk in, you knock it out, you move about to the next location, right? Same thing we say with students as far as routines for vocabulary and packing your backpack and all those kinds of things. Right, right. And everywhere we go, there's a different expectation. You change schools, surprise, now you have a totally different program. And so, change districts, surprise. All right, so what I wanted to share with you is that if you would be interested in going deeper into this and into the routines and into the exact how-tos and how it all works. We are starting a new program that came about because of all these conversations and all this concern and all the things that we've talked about in these slides. I've been thinking about this for like the past 6 months of what can I do to help bring teachers along to get comfortable here, because I think it will really help. And so we have created the functional language planning expert intensive. So meaning that our goal is to get you as close to being a functional language expert as possible, to feel confident in doing it and leading it and coaching others. And it's intensive because it's a lot, but we have it really mapped out step by step. It's a 12-week program. We're going to run from February 17th to May 12th. So it doesn't give you a lot of time to think about it, but you have a little time. The benefits in the program are that you'll be like tonight with like-minded people who are trying to accomplish the same thing, and hopefully from across the country, where you get all kinds of good perspectives from different ways that people do things. What I've learned in ELD, especially in our webinars, is that you all are from all over the country, but you all are nodding your head to the exact same challenges and feelings and emotions. And so we can bring all that together. We're going to deepen your understanding of SFL and how that then applies to planning and makes your planning life easier, right? Better aligned instructional plans that are truly focused on language, because as people began pushing into the and co-teaching, I feel like the language got lost, and I know we were all feeling it for a while. Now we're trying to reclaim it, and I think we have a good procedure routine for going about doing that. So we're going to knock out our lessons in record time. Right, we're going to streamline co-planning, as Karen mentioned, right? Those co-planning routines, the expectations, team planning time can take on some different structure, and you can still go to the bathroom. I was doing a coaching session with a teacher the other day, and she was talking really quickly, and I was like, Marcia, like, how much caffeine have you had today? She's like, no, I haven't been to the bathroom yet. And I was like, oh my gosh, please get off of Zoom and go to the bathroom. So I want to give you time to go get back to be able to go to the bathroom and get your planning done. I don't know why we keep coming back to the bathroom in this presentation. It's all me remembering that day. Watching your students gain more confidence and participating more, because when you focus on the language they need for fractions, then when they're in the classroom with fractions, they feel confident because they know how to talk about fractions. If you're teaching adjectives and they go into the fraction classroom, they're not feeling empowered, even though it's a good thing for them to learn. It's a mismatch, right? So if we're aligned, they'll feel much more able to participate, gain more confidence as well. All right. Are you interested in going further with it? Do you want a little bit more information about the program? How you feeling? Right. I'm going to guess that if you're still here, you're okay with hearing a little bit more about it, right? If you need to go, I understand that too. And I am super happy and grateful that you have been here this long. Oop, let me let this person in. All right, so let's just go a little bit more, like 5 minutes, right? So 12-week program, give you an idea of the structure. It's about, the big question is always time. Like, what's my time commitment? I know that's an issue, so we're working on the expectation that it'll be about 2 hours a week over those 12 weeks. All right, so we go through the 12 weeks, in the beginning, first week, we have a 2-hour live Zoom session like this where we kick everything off and we get started. Then the next week, you have asynchronous online content to review, to deepen your knowledge and think about and try some of the things. And then we do pretty much an every other week format. So only every other week do you need to show up live. The rest of the time, it's online content and application. All right, so for the first 3 weeks, we're going to really work on your confidence in explaining functional language planning and why it's the right fit for what you're doing, and be able to advocate for yourself and your program and help others understand what you need to do. This reminds me of I was working with coaching a teacher, and she was going to try something, and she came back and said, I didn't get a chance to try it because the third grade teacher handed me a vocabulary list and asked me to make sure that they knew those words by tomorrow. And I was like, it happens every day. And so I want you to be able to say to third grade teacher, right? I love that you want them to know this, and I will absolutely support you. And then you can give them your functional language explanation of why you'll work it in, but you have other language things that you need to do as well. So we're going to go over that planning model, that framework in more depth and detail of exactly what does that look like if we're teaching fractions, or what does that look like if we're teaching the solar system, right? We'll look at your curriculum examples because everybody's working with different programs, different grade levels, different expectations. So how to look at the curriculum you're working with and work with that framework. So just getting comfortable in the first 3 weeks. Then in the next 4 weeks, we really get into them practicing to streamline that planning process and get it down as a routine and a habit that you can do more quickly. We'll talk more about where the oral language development side comes into it, and that link to literacy, and how what you're doing with oral language moves students in their literacy as well, like we said. And then you're going to go through a literacy language planning process, another protocol where you learn lessons that'll be great if you do have a little pullout, or if you have a small group, or if you have some opportunity to work with early literacy. Right. Then we talk about how to take all of these things you've been practicing and apply them to a co-planning situation or colleague support. If you're asked to coach other teachers, or if you're in co-planning or team planning, how to take what you've learned and apply it in that situation. And then, like I said, with the teacher's archive and all our resources open to you, that you can handpick some of your own exploration as well. And so as we go through this, the part I'm excited about all of it, but the part that I am really excited about is this, right? I don't think we have enough reflection and conversation when we have PD. Right? I get to talk to you for a little bit of time, then we go on our own, and I don't know what happens, and you either have great success or you struggle a little, and there's no way to come back. So what was really important to me in this program is that we build in the time that we can have one-on-one conversations. So we'll have at least 2, depending on how many people are in the group and how we're going. I would love to be able to do more. But we'll have at least 2 one-on-one sessions that you schedule, right? You have access to my calendar, you pick a time that works for you, and you pick the goal. Right. I was talking to some people earlier today, and one who is signing up for the program, she just wanted to really work on her own classroom, her own planning. Her teammate, her ELD teammate, wanted to really focus more on understanding everything because she works in a middle school and she's the only one and she needs to be able to spread it to other people. Right. And so that looks different for each individual person, and you'll have time to work on those goals individually. We do have the option, we can always use Zoom. We have a cool option called SIBME, SIBME, where if you're comfortable with recording video in your classroom, if that's not intimidating to you, then in our SIBME platform, you can upload classroom video, and it allows me to do time-stamped feedback where I can say right at like minute 3:15, like this was a perfect example of, or here was a opportunity where you could have, or did you think about this, or that was beautiful. And it allows us to have very specific feedback in those coaching sessions, but that's an option for you. Some people aren't so comfortable with the video. So at least 2 of those. It's about 30 hours by the time you do 2 hours a week over 12 weeks, plus you're doing some planning on your own, those kinds of things. I have 3 coaching sessions on here because I really hope we can get more than 2. What we're going to do, you'll be the first group that goes through the program, and then we'll offer the program again and again and again down the road, and hopefully grow a community of professionals who want to get together quarterly, whether you're in group 1 or group 10, and still come together and talk and share and collaborate and give updates on new things we've learned that will be an ongoing value to you. You'll get access to all the templates. We have different resources like planning menus to pull from. I want to give you a couple documents that you can use to look over about the program. So I have this overview document I'm going to put in the chat box in just a minute. And then we also I have things popping up on different screens, confusing me, goes through the schedule of what each week would look like and see what the time commitment is. So I'll put those in the chat box in just a minute. All right, I've been talking and talking and talking. So now is your time to ask me questions, tell me what you think. Are we on the right path? Are you interested? Do you need more? Let me get you these links. Feel free to open your mic or use the chat box.
Ms. Ryder, thank you so much for all of your presentations. I always want to be a part of your class, but I always have conflict because I'm taking other classes as well. The thing is, do you offer any CPD credits with this course that you're taking? Because I noticed I didn't see that. And then I'm sorry.
As far as credit goes, we partner with UMass Global for our graduate credits. We have been approved by UMass Global that if it is of value to you to take the course for graduate credit, you can get 2 graduate credits for the course or for the program. If you don't worry about graduate credits, you definitely get a certificate for the hours of participation. If your district needs some other kind of documentation, you can. Maryland teachers, which I know we have a lot of that come to our webinars and programs, we have the application in with MSDE to get approved as a CPD. We don't have it back yet, but they've approved everything else we've sent them. So I expect that to come in any day now. So that would be 2 CPD units, I think they call them, that you could earn for the program. So in the chat, the first link is for the program overview. kind of talks about the basis for the program and why. And then the second one is the schedule with the detailed, like what's going to happen each week through the program, so you can see if it fits your schedule. All right, what other questions do you have? I know some, one question that we've had is tuition reimbursement. If your district offers tuition reimbursement, I know $750 is a chunk of money. I would highly encourage you, if you have a tuition reimbursement program, to talk to your district folks to see if this would be eligible. Usually with the UMass Global stamp of approval and the MSDE for our Maryland folks stamp of approval, usually when you have a university attached, then it will qualify. If you need to have graduate credits for it to qualify, we can make that happen too. If you're not sure and you need us to talk to somebody to help you see if you have those benefits and we could make it work for you, we'd be happy to do that, because take advantage of those benefits. You don't get a lot of bonuses, so do that first. Other places, I know some folks have gone to their ESOL program or their Title III people to see about funding. We even had 2 people go through Donors Choose and ask for donations for funding. I thought that was creative. That was a good plan. So if you need some support with that, just let us know. We can help you out. We do have a start date on the calendar, so you have about a month or so to work out the details. You have my email, but I'll put it here again anyway. If you have questions, or if you want to take the information back to your school, to your supervisors, to someone, to your team to discuss, and then you want to get back together, we absolutely can do that. And then let me give you one more link. If you would like to set up a one-on-one time to talk about your situation, your goals, and see if it's a fit for you, then go ahead to the calendly.com/English Learner Portal. It shows you my calendar. It offers 30-minute slots there, and grab a time. We can have a one-on-one conversation. Or if you want to invite a colleague or a supervisor or someone else to join the conversation, you're welcome to do that as well. We can continue conversations after today. What else can I answer for you or clarify for you? You've hung in there a long time. Oh, I got to tell you how to get the freebie. How to get the free access for a month. Katie is waiting. She knows she's going to be hearing from you. So if you email Katie, our super assistant, who is texting me now about, she's like, where are they? Email Katie at EnglishLearnerPortal.com and tell her that you are eligible for the 1 free month access to the teacher's archive, and she will set you up with that. She'll grant you access. She'll tell you how to log in. If you already have a password, you'll know what to do. It's the same way you log into everything else in our system. If you've never logged in before, Katie can help you get logged in. But you have a month to kind of dig through all of our materials and see, do you like our style? Do you like our message? What else? What else can you learn from that archive? So just email her for your free access. All right, you have given a lot of time and contributed a ton to the conversation. I really appreciate the thought you've given to it. I appreciate, Karen, your support for always being there. You know, I respect your opinion on everything, so I'd love to debrief with you after. She's always my coach. And, you know, everybody should find those colleagues. I mean, oh my gosh, we started working together in 1993. 1993. We're so young for that. All right. Thank you, everybody. Any questions, please reach out. We'll process the recording, get it up on the website. You'll get an email probably late tonight or tomorrow morning with the link on where to access that recording. Feel free to share it with anyone who you think might be interested or might feel validated by getting some of that information. All right. Thank you. So good to see you. Have a great evening and just slide through Friday. It's almost the weekend.
Good night.